gentlemen, welcome back to the CYF Podcast, the show where we go behind the scenes to give you tips and tricks to help you create your future. On today's episode, I'm joined by one of my absolute dearest friends in the whole wide universe. He is a coffee man, he is a music man, he is a media man, and he is a former politician man. And I would like to introduce the founder and owner of the Black Sheep Lounge, my best friend, Lucas Spinosa.
Matthew, how are you, man?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on the pod.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be on the flip side of this because you joined me on my podcast, probably 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2.5 years. Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And I like being interviewed more than interviewing. It's easier. There's less pressure.
So good luck. So? Yeah, I like being interviewed too than interviewing too as well. Yeah, it's very, very, very cool.
Yeah, because I think on both sides you really never know what's coming.
Yeah.
But it's nice when I can kind of sit back and you can lead me.
Yeah.
It's like a little dance.
Oh, okay.
Little dance.
All right. Ooh. For those of you who don't know, Lucas Spinosa is the owner and the creator of the Black Sheep Lounge. And I want to dive a little bit into the story because the show is about creating your future, having tips and tricks to help other people who want to get into maybe the similar field of what to do and do that. I'm going to try so hard not to laugh through this thing because
I'm smiling so much
I know,
already.
we're just looking at each other, just smiling, just nothing but white pearls all around. But if you could kind of go into maybe how you kind of started the Black Sheep Lounge, the process, what that kind of looked like, and where you started and where you are today. The floor is yours.
Sure. Spark Notes version, 2013. My dad was looking at the building next to his bakery, and it was for sale for a while, but kind of lowered drastically in price. So he jumped on that. He wanted to put a salon there. My cousin's a hairdresser, and she couldn't take the risk at the time. So now we've got this building. My dad's like, hey, do you want to put your cafe there? I didn't really put any thought into it other than our joke about Spurgashis, which I'll touch on after.
Yeah, Spurgashi. This is a very interesting story. I think people are going to like this one.
It was literally, it was kind of serious, but mostly joking between the two of us.
For sure.
And then, so my dad took it seriously and said, you should do it. But he's like, if you do it, I'm not helping you. I'll help you with the building, but then you've got to run this business. I was 19 when he told me that, so I didn't know how serious running a business was. Skip 2 years later. Black Sheep opens, kind of this idea of community and art, and I fell in love with coffee kind of after the fact. I've always drank it, but specialty was something was foreign to me. I had no idea that it was a thing, and then we started roasting our own coffee, and here we are.
Yeah, I love it. And, we've obviously been best friends since
2009.
High school. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Lucas is also a sponsor of the podcast with the Black Sheep Lounge. You can use your promo code CYF20 when you go place your order online at Black Sheep Niagara.
That's the only reason why I'm here.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have invited me otherwise.
Yeah, so. That's I would always invite you. Always, of course. And I think maybe if you want to tell the story about Spurgashis, I think that would be pretty cool.
I don't even really know what year it was.
It was right before I think you even opened or were considering opening the cafe. Because I remember you sat me down and you said, Matt, I'm going to open this cafe and I want you to be 100% in it to win it with me. Yeah. This is how I remember the story.
No, you're right, because I think it was more of a joke when we were in high school. And then when it was getting closer, it was like, okay, if we're going to do this, I need you 100%. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
You can't do anything. You can't do school. You can't do music. You can't do anything else. You got to do the cafe.
You can't put Matt in a box. You can't put Matt in a box.
No, and you were just like, I'm doing this, so this is all I'm doing, and that's it. And that's a true testament because now it'll
be 7 years this summer.
7 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So long story short, Spinosa, Garashi, Spurgashi.
So we always call each other Spurgashi brothers.
Well, it's kind of morphed into Spurgoosh.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I don't know why. That's probably just the nickname.
Spurgoosh.
Yeah, Spurgoosh. When we call each other. Yeah, no, it's great. And I want to talk to you about you open up the cafe. You're young. You're doing all this work. You're heavily involved in the Welland community. Then you decide to go into politics for a bit. I would love to know your experience with politics. I think you were the youngest, right? You were the youngest counselor.
Youngest or tied for. We haven't been able to confirm it because
for the city of Welland.
For the city of Welland, I think there was someone who was maybe a few weeks younger than me, 40 or 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But aside from that, we've looked back and that'd be the only person who might have beat me. So definitely one of the youngest counselors in Welland. But
what was your experience? Tell us about it.
So I have no aspirations to be in politics whatsoever. I think anyone who knows me wasn't really surprised that I would have done it, but probably surprised that I actually did it, from the time I opened the Black Sheep, I knew that there were holes, right? And so I would look outside of the shop and think, well, this isn't my property, but it's really disheveled, and I wanted to do something about it. And so I started calling people like, is it the city? City says, no, it's not us. It's this canal corporation. So I call the canal corporation. They said, no, it's not us. It's the city. Call the city back. They say, oh, well, maybe it's the region. I call the region. And I kept going in circles and thinking, well, why does no one have the answer to this? Because if my property were dirty, the city could slap a notice on my front door and say, if it's not cleaned in 7 days, we send out a crew and leave you the bill and your taxes.
Right.
Right. So it just felt really unfair to me. So I put out this thing online saying, hey, if anyone wants to help, we're doing this canal clean. We're going to start at the Black Sheep and see how far we can go, right? And
what year was this that you did
that
this?
was 2015, so it was our first year being open. And to my shock, we had 130 people show up. I had no inkling whatsoever that was going to happen, and it was very organic. And so we spent 2-3 hours out there cleaning up. We had a couple local organizations donate bins, like garbage bins, pretty large ones. There was a construction company, Ram Construction, that donated their staff, paid staff, to come there and help us. They had gloves and bags and also everything we needed to do this cleanup. We supplied the food and drinks, and then it became an annual thing. So we did it every year for 5 years, and it stopped during COVID, but it's going to come back this summer. So I guess technically it would be year 6, even though it would be really going into our 7th year of business. But that was how I started getting involved with community stuff. And then people started to notice. So the BIA, which in Welland was the Welland Downtown BIA, one of their executive directors had reached out to me saying, hey, don't know if you know what a BIA is. She explained it to me. I wasn't sure if you'd be interested. So I joined the BIA and quickly became the chair of marketing, events, and promotions. Ran a couple local events. Most notably was Feast Street, which was our revival of a food fest in Welland. And first year was 15,000 people. Second year was 25,000 people. Dozens of vendors. We tried to bring it back to the roots, which was instead of having $16 to $18 lobster rolls, we brought back $1, $2, and $3 tasting platters. And that really made it accessible to a larger group of people who otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford to go. And, I really fell in love with doing that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until I started doing larger events that people said, you should really get involved with politics. And I never thought of it before then. And so in May, I put in my application. I hit 4,200 doors myself, knocking on them, every single one. I did that twice.
Incredible.
It took me 3 months and a lot of shin splints.
Yeah.
And I was the most highly voted for counselor in Welland history because of that.
What? I didn't even know that, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
First time.
Wow.
And now this is not bragging, but I bring it up because it shows you that I had no credentials.
Yeah.
Really, on paper, I shouldn't have been elected.
Yeah.
But it was my willingness to put in the work, my attention to the people that I was talking to, and I wasn't going to ignore people who normally don't vote. I was starting to get a bunch of politicians coming up to me saying, hey, listen, if you want to be successful in this, don't hit this area, like the poor neighborhoods don't vote. And, typically these types of people don't vote. And I'm like, well, maybe they don't vote now, but maybe they feel like their voice doesn't matter.
Right.
So if you empower their voice, they're going to want to vote. And sure enough, that worked very well for me. And then it went downhill at the very end. But
that's one thing I kind of want to touch on.
Sure.
And what, all those credentials that you just stated are absolutely amazing, I think with how you look, how you present yourself, and how you carry yourself, and how young you are. I think there's something to be said about that. And I think that given in this whole Niagara area, there's an older generation of people who have a lot of quote unquote control as to what happens here. And I think that how you come across or with your passion and your ideas, maybe that would piss a lot of people off of how you look or how you address yourself. But I think the testament is based on how you treat people, your work ethic, and what you've done. And that is the proof in the pudding, or all the shit that you've done where it's been amazing. And for people who to just judge or to cast something or to pass judgment on how you look or how you present yourself, I think that's not really the right way on how to go about doing things. So if you could kind of touch about how you kind of got out of politics too, for that, I would love to dive into that. And I think a lot of people will get a lot of value from that.
Cut me off if I go too long.
Go ahead. But,
of
course.
I find it really confusing because you brought that point up about my image and my age. Obviously, it was commented on when I walked in here.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I don't expect. I get it all the time.
Of course.
I don't notice it as much as I used to notice it, but it wasn't a barrier, obviously. I wouldn't have got elected if people really didn't think I was capable of the job based on my age or based on my appearance. I actually thought the age was going to be a bigger barrier than the appearance was, and it was a bit backwards, but obviously wasn't that big of a barrier, right? I wouldn't have been elected otherwise.
Totally.
I was 23 when I was elected. I think I was running at 22. So
it's crazy.
Yeah.
To think about that now, and it's like you're gonna be
I'm bald now.
Yeah. But you're also gonna be 28 next in July, right?
No.
In June, right? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all right. Like 7 or 8 days, something like that. June 10th.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Happy early birthday.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem.
But yeah, no, it was bizarre, and I was successful on council. You know, especially the first year, everyone seemed to rally together. All councilors, there was really no bad blood. It was just a bunch of excited people wanting to make positive changes in the city. It wasn't until the second and third year that it started to feel like people were picking sides based on voting patterns, right? So the more progressive councilors seem to vote together, and some of the, I don't want to call them regressive, but I'll just say less willing to take risks. Councilors that were less willing to take risks, they were the ones that really started to side together. The difference was, I'm going to lump myself into the progressive category. We never spoke to each other about how we were going to vote. We'd get our agenda the previous Friday. The meeting was on Tuesday. I would read my agenda all weekend, try and figure out what we were going to talk about, but never called any other counselors saying, hey, vote this way, right? But we knew for a fact that some of the other counselors were doing that, right? And you could tell because they had prepared statements. And so it started to get frustrating thinking, well, I mean, I guess it's a strategy. They want a certain thing done, and
it's politics.
And you got to do what you got to do, right? But what started to get frustrating was the spinning of narratives. You know, we had someone, the most prominent example. So we had a community member come into the council chambers asking, hey, you know, we should use one of these very seldomly used city of Welland properties as an emergency shelter for the homeless. Now, on the surface, of course. Right. Of course, we're going to do that, right? Because no one wants to exacerbate homelessness. We all want to help where we can. And if this building is going unused, we might as well use it for good. But once we started digging into it a little bit more and asking questions, we noticed that there were holes, right? Now, this was all a presentation based on willingness. Like, we'd love to see this. You know, I would love to do this. But there were no
action steps.
There was no plan.
No plans, logistics, right? Or anything like that. And that's one of the things is like, you can have the best idea in the world, but if you don't break it down and say, this is step one, this is step two, and then if step two works, and then this is the next step, and then if that doesn't work, then this is this. So it doesn't sound like there was anything.
No, and the other thing too is I'm careful about knocking it because the person that brought it up is an incredible individual and does a lot of great work in the region. But I just think it was one of those a little bit too excited before there was a plan kind of thing. And anyway, what ended up happening was that was the first meeting. We just kind of talked about it. We asked questions. There seemed to be holes. So we said, come back and see us. A couple weeks goes by. This person comes back. And that same night we had someone from the Niagara region, an employee at the Niagara region, come in who is a part of their homelessness department. Right? Or at least someone in that field. And she was giving us statistics and was actually opposed to us giving this building. There were a multitude of reasons, one of which was, well, if they're outside of the Niagara region system, we now no longer have a track of where that person is. So let's say in Welland, you know that there's always this person that hangs up by Division Street. An outreach worker can find them and say, hey, listen, sir, would you like to come back? And we've got food for you and you can stay here. Well, now we've removed them from their normal spot. We're not able to trace them. The people at this municipal building that we would potentially donate has no history. We don't know their drug history or if they have any history of mental illness or what their situation is. Now we're also basically saying, we're going to put 1 or 2 volunteers in a room and hope for the best with people who might be high, might have all sorts of different problems, and we just won't know what they are.
Right.
And so not only is it a liability, it's actually hurting the people we want to help. And so instead of donating the building, we thought, why don't we just give money to the Niagara region for that specific use?
Right.
And that was kind of the rebuttal. And what ended up happening was the majority of council voted against donating this building. because of the way that I look and how progressive I am, people thought, you know what, Spinosa hates the homeless.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the beginning of the end for me. You know, it was a bunch of people really not knowing what they were talking about or not looking into this situation at all. And it blew up. And so there was vandalism and targeted attacks and all sorts of awful things that happened to the shop and my family and friends. And it just wasn't good. And I can take the heat.
Of course,
you know,
you
can break
take the heat on a lot of things.
Yeah, you can. That's why I'm still talking about this stuff, right? Because I think there's lessons to be learned. If I was afraid of it, I would have hidden a mountain somewhere and never came out of my cave. But I think it's important for people to talk about it. I just didn't think the detriment to my business was worth the risk.
100%. And I think, you know, I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And I think that I even remember after when you parted ways with counsel and stuff, I remember I said to you, like this is only just going to open up the next thing for you. Like this is only going to go open for the next thing. Before Black Sheep, before politics and everything, drummer, musician. Yep. You're in high school. We're in high school on the St. Mike's drum line together. Was your goal always to be a musician, entertainer, or that? And then, like, what was like the switch that made you say, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this coffee thing, and then what's going to be the switch that's like going to trigger you into the next thing? Like, what's the progression for that?
Very good segue.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny in retrospect. I feel like I want to say that I didn't want it, but when I've said that out loud, my dad, it was quick to correct me. He's like, no, you wanted to do it.
Of course.
And so
we all want to be fucking rock stars.
I think maybe I did at the time. So I'm going to just stick with that. I think that I did. And I kind of got a taste of it, you know, when it wasn't fully professional, but I played with a band that toured the United States. I got my P2 so I could work in the States. And, you know, I spent about 8 months out of 2 years in mostly in the Bible Belt, but touring the United States. And it was an incredible opportunity, you know, having the bus and hotel rooms. It was kind of totally different from, you know, other bands that I've played in where, you know, you have none of that. You know, you have to drive your own vehicle and pay for your own gas. And by the time you get to these gigs, you've already lost money.
Exactly.
And playing on incredibly large stages, which is something I wasn't used to. But after coming back, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this forever. Because I love entertaining. I love
touring
being on
is
stage.
Exhausting.
Yeah, it's just...
It's a lot. It's a lot on your mental. Like, I don't think a lot of people realize that. Being a drummer too, and like touring with the different bands too, it's like, you know, you're out of town, you're traveling you're in a car with the same 4 or 5 dudes, like for 6 hours at a time. Then by the time you check into the hotel, by the time you do, then you go to sound check to do the gig, and then you're doing sound check at 4 o'clock, but you don't play till 10:30 at night. Then you play for a half hour, then you got to pack up and everything. Then you got to go back to the hotel room for 2 o'clock, probably include some drinking of some sorts in there, and then, you know, wake up and repeat and then do the whole thing. It's super, super taxing on the brain.
It is, and some people love that stuff.
Totally, for sure. But it's great. Don't get it wrong. It's awesome. Like, traveling and playing music with some of your best pals is some of the funnest times I've ever had. You know, and I think there'll still be many more to come. But with that, now that the music, so now that you touched on the music stuff of it, now what's Black Sheep now? What's next? What's on the next horizon for you?
It's funny because I think most people, when they think of their future, they have some sort of plan. I almost intentionally don't have one because I think every time I've tried to do something, it brought me in a different direction.
Totally.
And so now I've become a little bit more open to the winds almost. You know, I had an example that I used today about the Black Sheep, and I'm the captain of the ship, you know, so I have a trajectory. But at the same time, I don't control the water and I don't control the wind.
I love that.
You know, and at the end of the day, the sea's going to take me where it takes me. As much as I may try to force it in a different direction, a strong enough wind will move the ship, right? And so I think it's foolish to try and fight it. You know, I think if there's something that's truly pulling you in one direction, maybe it's worth giving it a shot. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I think I became kind of nihilistic and pretty pessimistic about people and the community after council. And
because you were a ghost on social media.
I still kind of am.
Still kind of am, yeah.
I mean, I became really cynical about human nature, which is not like me.
Totally.
And
not
so,
like you at all, yeah.
It took me a while to find my footing, you know, and figure out, okay, what's the real problem here, right? Is it that everyone sucks and, I'm this lost little puppy? I don't think so. I think it was, I need to find a new way or a more effective way of communicating, how you can make positive change in a community. And I found out that my way was not politics, right?
What is your way?
I think it's through the community, right? And not saying that politics can't have positive change. It absolutely can. But I think this environment, things need to come from the ground, Government, no matter how small, like at a city council level, is still kind of in a tower, hovering above people looking down. And not that it's intentional, but it just happens to be that way. And being able to connect with somebody at a grassroots level, at a community level, where people don't think that you're trying to make money at their expense, that's where it needs to happen right now, at least for me. And so I've focused a lot more on boards and committees and volunteer work, and even just on Black Sheep, because Black Sheep had done a lot of good for the community. And that was, regardless of me, it was the fact that artists and creatives and just people, even people just working from their laptop, shape what the Black Sheep is, you know?
With that being said, you have, for anyone who hasn't been to the Black Sheep Lounge, it is quite the vibe when you go in there. I think people go in there for the atmosphere. I think a lot of people go there to talk with you and converse with you and see what's kind of going on in the community, because there's so many things that you're always promoting and going on with there. Now we're switching gears to Lucas Spinosa, the 22-year-old businessman with this. Obviously, you've learned a lot of business aspects from your dad. Your brother has the gym right beside. The whole Spinosa family is just like this serial purebred of like crazy Italian hungry entrepreneurs who just absolutely crush it. What do you think is the most important aspects to have a successful and sustaining business?
Interesting. I think this is going to be wrong for most people, but don't focus on the money, because
I agree with that.
If you don't love what you do, as cliche as that sounds, it really isn't going to work. I see a lot of people in my industry, I won't even limit it to coffee, but let's just say hospitality or the service industry, that they try so hard to be something else that it doesn't work for them. They grow too quickly, they bring on too many staff, and people notice that their product or their service declines because they're just focused on growth more than they are on improving the experience for their customer. And every business is different, but that's why I don't think you can find a person that's been to my place that hates it, because I just won't allow it. If you come there, I will do everything in my power to make sure that you enjoy your time there. And if for some reason the product doesn't live up to your expectation, someone on staff or myself will rectify that, and I find a lot of places, they just focus so much on what's our exit strategy, what's our numbers, what's our quarter looking like, blah, blah, blah. It really doesn't work. Unless your mission truly is make money, get out. That's not sustainable anyway. That's why they're getting out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Sell it to somebody else for a bunch of money and they can handle the problems after the fact. But no one ever talks about those companies.
No.
Right? Because they're few and far between and they're not exciting. People get excited about things that remind them of themselves, like a mirror. And hence the name Black Sheep. You come in there and it doesn't matter where you're from or what your beliefs are. It's a place to have those conversations. Yeah. And I think being honest about who you are and what your product is, being unapologetic about that, but also being willing to learn and grow with time is the recipe for success for any business.
I love that. And where can people currently buy some of the products? Because there's a couple different aspects to the business. There's the wholesaling, and I really want people to get some good, actual, practical business insight when it comes to this. So where how did you kind of start the wholesaling aspect of their business, and can you explain what that is to people, and what's it currently doing now, and how's the e-commerce side of the business really helping in addition to the actual cafe itself?
For sure. So yeah, that's two parts of our business. Wholesale is a good chunk of it, but it's definitely not the goal. The way we look at it is our wholesale customers are partners. I don't want a lot of them. And I've told every single wholesale partner that I have, there's only a few of you. I'm going to focus all of my energy on you. And the reason for that is wholesale means I have to give up a bigger chunk of our money to you, right? So that you can make some money.
Right.
And I'm happy to do that. But the trade is you get to use our product, but we're also going to invest in your success, right? That's why we call it, pun intended, partnership,
Nice.
Okay.
That's what you say to your
Yeah, it's a
wholesalers,
partnership.
the partnership.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like
man.
that.
It's important because we look at wholesaling strategically, right? We want a very small number of cafes using our products well so that they're a proper representation of our product. It's a draw for them because if there's 6 cafes in St. Catharines selling our coffee, it's not a draw. It's not something that's going to pull someone into your business, right?
It dilutes kind of like the accessibility aspect, I guess you could say.
And competition is good for business.
Yeah.
It's good for business,
Of course.
And so that's why we're strategic about our partners. We try to have 2 or 3 in every community, or kind of respective on the population of that community.
And who are some of the partners, if you could say like 1 or 2 of them, or whoever?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wayne Gretzky's in Niagara-on-the-Lake. They use our coffee make cold brew for their cocktails. The Grove, also right there in Niagara-on-the-Lake / Virgil area. We work with Wandering Spirits in St. Catharines, Bushel and Peck in St. Catharines. There's Sweetie's Bake Shop in Ridgeway, Third Space here in Niagara Falls, and a bunch of other places. I think we're about 20 wholesale customers now, and that's pretty close to the cap. I have maybe 3 to 5 more spots, and that's going to be the top of it, because we offer staff training and want to make sure that they're using the product effectively. But on the e-commerce side of things, that's kind of a result of COVID, right? So the reason why we didn't do it before is we were so heavily invested in food that...
And the food is amazing.
Thank you.
Yes.
But we don't do food anymore since COVID. So we kind of switched to only doing coffee so that we can do that really well. And the e-commerce part of the business really isn't aiming at shipping everywhere in the world. It's really just getting a more convenient experience for our customer. So the majority of our online customers are actually in Niagara. So it provides them an experience that's convenient. They can shop with us 24/7, and the coffee shows up at their door, right? We're fast, we're inexpensive, and it's a high quality product. I mean, it's inexpensive compared to specialty, but not commodity coffee, obviously. I'm not opposed to shipping, but it's the same principle as wholesale. It's so competitive online that you have to offer free shipping. And a lot of the time, if I'm shipping to Edmonton, I just sent out a package today. It cost me $25 to ship it. So it's not always worth it. That's why I think some people get confused with numbers. They feel like they have to be the biggest and be the fastest, but you don't always make the most money that way.
This episode of the CYF Podcast is also brought to you by the Niagara Falls Ryerson Innovation Hub, located on Zimmerman Avenue here in downtown Niagara Falls. Thank you so much for being part of this and supplying this amazing podcast studio. Now back to the program. So you talked about risk-taking earlier. I love it. You're just looking at me. It's like, yeah, you greaseball, you absolute greaseball. I love it.
No, not a greaseball.
Listen, we have a lot of like inside jokes, a lot of stuff though. I want to talk for risk taking. I remember like you had to do some really heavy investing too. Like obviously with my business with a marketing agency, very low cost in terms of overhead. You know, laptops, software systems, design elements, cameras, blah blah, whatever. Now things are starting to get a lot more costly, the more clients, and obviously that we're growing to. But with you opened up the own roastery part of. Could you talk about that investment process? Share some numbers if you like. What were you feeling at that time of saying like, wow, is this going to work? What was the plan? What was going through your head? And please tell us the story.
Sure. I mean, I like the word investment better than risk, because everything technically is a risk, and
a calculated risk in entrepreneurship. That's what I like to say.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
all calculated risk.
I think risking not chasing your passions is bigger than not, right? And that's why I don't look at it that way, because risk seems negative. And money is money, right? Not everyone has access to it, obviously, but it's not a big deal. You can work on anything. You know, I fell in love with, or even not, I shouldn't say fell in love with, but I learned that roasting coffee was even a thing because of a TEDx talk that I saw. And this guy was roasting coffee in this cast iron pan somewhere in this tropical island. And he said that roasting really bad coffee fresh is better than the best stale coffee. And now as a coffee professional, it's a weird way to think about it, but that's initially what sparked my interest in it. And, you know, here's a guy who was roasting coffee with $5 worth of green raw product and a pan he probably could have just found somewhere, maybe at a thrift store. So for a $10 investment, you can roast coffee at home. And so, a lot of people that are popping up in the coffee world are starting really, really small like that. And I got really lucky. I found this Probat roaster, which is, they're in the top 3 coffee roasting companies in the world for actual physical roasters. Built in Germany. It was 1988, so they were still using fully cast iron drums. Incredible machine. And this guy was at a bakery show, and the only reason I was there is because my dad's a baker.
Shout out Spinosa's Bakery.
Yeah, and we were already open, but we weren't roasting. And I asked him, I'm like, is that a coffee roaster? And he's like, yeah, why, you want it?
And you're like, yeah.
I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what do you want for it? He's like, I don't know. Give me like $3,500. I'm like, okay. How about
you mean the thing that you installed in the cafe was $3,500?
Yep.
No.
And what's crazy about it is this is my small little
light bulb
entrepreneur mind.
Yeah.
When I was young, I was like 21 at the time. I was like, why don't you charge me $4,000 and give me a year to pay for it? Because $4,000 for a roaster now, I would do 10 times over. If I could have 10 roasters for 40 grand, I would do it right now.
Right.
Because I could make my money back. I could buy them, sell them to other people, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, back then, $4,000 was like, it's going to take me some time to find that money.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, he agreed to it, but then came back at me with another rebuttal, which was, why don't I give you 2 years and give me $5 grand? Now, that's not a great interest rate when you think about how in the grand scheme of things, but for that stage of my business, that was a huge 2 years to pay for this thing. And we got it in the cafe, and it was transformative for the business. So we started roasting coffee from then on out. It maybe took 6 weeks. He had it refurbished for us, powder coated it, got it up in running condition, and then installed it for us, which was incredible.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that. What's the number one thing? I ask this to every guest. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
It's not actually business related, but it helped me when I was in politics, which is consider the source. And
I like that. Consider the source. What do you mean by that? Like, do you trust us to okay, if someone's telling you this advice? Because one thing, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. When I hear something like that, consider the source, it's like taking whoever is saying the advice, take that into account too as well.
Yeah, it's pretty much exactly right. So good friend of mine, Dave, he was on council with me. He's still on Welland City Council. His mom used to say that, which was consider the source. And so whenever he was having a hard time dealing with, what people were saying, she would say, well, look who it's coming from.
Right.
Should it really bug you?
Right.
And she didn't mean like be judgy of other people. She meant it like, if it's not coming from you, then why do you care?
Right.
Right. Like if you don't have these doubts, why do you care what they're thinking? And when it was put so simply, I really resonated with that, and it helped me a lot, and sometimes I used it in a judgy way, thinking like, here's someone who, they're doing everything wrong in life, at least from my perspective.
Right.
Why would I care about what they think about what I'm doing with my life?
Mm-hmm.
So I've always very much liked it. When it comes to business, I don't know if I've ever been given any really solid one-liners. It's really just been trial and error and a ton of luck thrown in there.
You think you had a ton of luck with your business? Yeah.
I'm a straight white guy born in North America with parents that were successful in business. Couldn't get luckier in the jackpot of life.
That is very true. That is very true. But and I think it's also a testament to from your dad's work ethic too as well. And also
100%.
and your mom is now working too. Well, she's been with you so it's it's good to see that it's everything has stayed within the family
100%.
Over the last couple of years.
No, I mean my dad has worked harder than any person I've ever met in my life.
He's a beast. He is next level. It's
dumb.
Yeah, it's insane. If people could just see the behind the scenes of Rick Spinosa's behind the scenes, wow. I think people would just be absolutely flabbergasted with what they see.
For sure. And I mean, that's one thing that's always been kind of amazing having him as a dad too, is yes, he was a tough disciplinarian, but he always did it with good intentions. It was always to teach some sort of lesson or, to condition us for life, us being my brother and I. And the man worked so hard. His parents came here, literally suitcases with nothing. They found any job they could get. They tried to find someone who spoke Italian. They worked for them until they got used and abused and moved on. And, house to house, hoping for the best. You know, when I say house to house, these are places that they were renting, obviously couldn't afford to buy.
Right.
And then, I mean, my dad worked in the same place for 20 years, 16-hour days every single day, so he could get what he had with my mom and then raising my brother and I, and then built his business for another 15 years before he was able to give me an opportunity to do what I wanted to do. And he took an extra sacrifice doing that. So, I mean, when it comes to luck, I got lucky. You know, I hate when I see people that have my kind of luck going around saying, here's business, here's what you need to know, wagging their finger at you like they're some sort of wise philosopher, when in fact they were given everything that they have.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing shameful about that. If people want to piss on you because you had people that care about you, then who cares? Be happy you have a support system. Be happy that you were able to use that to your advantage.
100%. And with that, with having all this experience, I have to ask you another question was, when was the last time you did something for the first time?
Probably today.
Yeah?
Yeah. I always do something for the first time every day.
Really?
Yeah.
What'd you do today?
It's not that it was a new thing, but it was a new place.
Okay.
So I went for a bit of a walk before I came here, started reading this book called The Madness of Crowds. Pretty amazing, talking about groupthink and how people get lumped into categories. And it was just the location. So it was kind of nice being in nature and reading a book out there. Part of the reason why I was tardy here, I lost track of time, and I'm like, oh crap, I got to get to this podcast.
Yeah, it's okay. No, that's totally fine. And with that being said, we're gonna wrap things up shortly here. I was gonna say, for people who want to find you, stay connected with you, what's the best place where people can check you out and stay connected?
I mean, the best way is always to just come to the Black Sheep in Welland. We are going to be opening kind of a new roasting headquarters. It's not so much a cafe, but you'll be able to find me in Welland most days. Otherwise, blacksheepniagara.com. That's where we have all of our products, but there's also a contact form, and that goes directly to me. You can also do at Black Sheep Niagara on Instagram. That goes to me and my fiance, Katie. So I get it every time, but it's not always me responding. So if you ask for me, it'll be me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. I love that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into the CYF podcast. Lucas, thank you so much for joining on. Don't forget, use promo code CYF20 when you visit blacksheepniagara.com to get 20% off your online order. We hope that this episode helped you create your future, and we will see you in the next episode. Peace!